I never imagined my own family would become strangers to me. But I suppose you don't always see betrayal coming, especially not when you've been taught to endure it in silence. My name is Carla Jennings. I'm 48 years old. And until recently, I believed that love meant sacrifice, that family meant loyalty, and that being the dependable one would eventually be enough. It wasn't. Growing up, I was the strong one, not the golden child. That title belonged to my younger brother Nathan. He was charming, spontaneous, and a master at being rescued. I, on the other hand, was reliable. I worked 2 jobs by the time I turned 21, helped pay off my parents' mortgage by 27, and never missed a birthday or hospital visit. But I didn't do those things for praise. I did them because that's what you do. When you love people who raised you even imperfectly, you give, until giving becomes your entire identity. And maybe that's why I didn't notice that for years they only called when they needed something. I started suspecting things had shifted when my mother called one night in March. "Can you help Nathan out just this once?" Her voice had that rehearsed softness I knew too well. "He's been trying so hard since the divorce. His credit's just a little messy." Translation: Nathan had blown through another paycheck, and I was expected to cover the fallout again. I asked, "How much is just this once this time?" She hesitated. "About $3,200 for his rent and car payment. But Carla, he's family." Funny how that word only shows up when someone wants a withdrawal. I sent it, not because I wanted to, but because the guilt of saying no felt heavier than the overdraft notice that would come later. Weeks passed, then months. Each time, Nathan found a new crisis: a frozen account, a bounced check, a security deposit. I started keeping track, quietly. In 6 months, I'd sent over $11,000. No thank you notes, no offers to repay, just more requests, more silence when I needed help. My breaking point didn't come with shouting. It came at my father's retirement dinner. We were at a restaurant, nothing fancy but meaningful. I had paid for the venue, the caterings, the decorations. But when it came time for speeches, my mother raised her glass and said, "To Nathan, who's always been there when we needed a laugh, to the light of our family, and to Dad, who taught him everything he knows." There was no mention of me, no mention of the bills I covered when Dad's insurance lapsed, no toast for the daughter who took the night shifts to help save the house during the pandemic, just laughter and clinking glasses. I sat there, smiling, pretending the tears in my throat were from the wine. That night, I went home and opened a spreadsheet. I titled it "Things I Paid For Without Being Asked." Column A, dates. Column B, amounts. Column C, who benefited. By midnight, the total read $38.0940.63. It was more than a number. It was a reckoning. The next morning, Nathan texted me, "Hey sis, can you help with a hotel deposit? I got an interview in Austin. Might be the one." No good morning, no how are you, just expectation. And for the first time, I didn't respond. What hurt wasn't the money. It was realizing I'd been conditioned to believe my worth depended on what I gave, not who I was. I started pulling back. Didn't pick up every call. Didn't offer to pay for Mom's latest prescription mix-up. Didn't show up when Nathan claimed his fridge broke and he just couldn't eat. And what happened? They noticed. Not with concern, but with complaints. "Carla's acting distant. Carla's not herself lately. Carla must be stressed. She's always so emotional." No one asked why, but I was done auditioning for a family that only clapped when I performed for them. I began making changes. I spoke to a financial advisor, opened a separate account, updated my will. Then I wrote a letter, one for each of them. No threats, no accusations, just truth. A list of the things I had contributed, followed by one sentence: "Going forward, I will not be financing emotional debt." When I mailed the letters, my hands shook, not from fear, but release. For the first time in decades, I wasn't trying to be the glue. I was letting things fall apart to see what was real and what was just built on guilt. They didn't reply to my letter. Not at first. No call, no message, not even a passive-aggressive group text. Just silence, which somehow hurt more than I expected. It wasn't rage. It wasn't tears. It was the cold efficiency of erasure. You stop giving, and suddenly you stop existing. 2 weeks later, my mom finally called. "Carla, are you okay?" she asked in that concerned but rehearsed voice. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'm fine. There was a pause. Not the kind that invites connection, but the kind that calculates what to say next. Your letter came as a surprise. I waited. I just didn't realize you were keeping tabs. On the family. That word again, family. Used not as comfort, but as currency. I took a breath. I wasn't keeping tabs. I was setting boundaries. She exhaled sharp and short. You know your father was hurt. I wanted to say, did he hurt when I paid his medical deductible last year? Or was he hurt when I skipped my own vacation to cover Nathan's third rent crisis? But instead I said, I'm not doing this, Mom. I love you, but I'm not going back to pretending. Her voice hardened. Fine. If that's what you've decided. Click. And that was that. I wish I could tell you it got easier. But the truth is, breaking free from a role you've played your entire life feels a lot like grief. I missed them. Even the dysfunction. The calls at midnight. The chaotic holiday plans. Even Nathan's lazy jokes about Carla, the CEO of the family fund. But the silence gave me space, and space brought clarity. I began noticing other things, like how peaceful my weekends became. How my apartment felt like mine again, without my mother's guilt echoing off the walls. How food tasted better when it wasn't eaten in resentment. Then came the Facebook post. A photo of Nathan and my parents at dinner, smiling. Captioned, grateful for those who always support us no matter what. No tags, no mention of me. Just airbrushed unity, polished absence. I stared at that image for a long time. Not out of jealousy, but because it confirmed something I hadn't dared say aloud. They were already practicing life without me. The next blow came not from them, but from my cousin Erin. She called out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Hey, weird question, she began cautiously. Did you really cut ties with your mom and Nathan? I paused. Not exactly. I just stepped back. She hesitated. It's just, I heard you drained your parents' account before ghosting. My blood froze. Excuse me. Yeah, Nathan told Aunt Lisa you took money and disappeared, that your mom's credit was impacted. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, so desperate, that it almost didn't surprise me. Later that night, I called my bank, verified everything, all clean. But the fact they'd rather lie than sit with the truth that stung. They couldn't guilt me anymore. So now they'd smear me. I didn't react, didn't post, didn't defend myself. Let them tell whatever story they needed to avoid facing the one where they were wrong. But one thing became clear. This wasn't just a boundary, this was a reckoning. And I'd only just begun. About a month after I'd sent the letters, I got a text from Nathan. Need to talk. Urgent, please. I ignored it. The next day, he showed up at my door. I hadn't seen him in person in over a year. He looked tired. Not in the way that means someone's working hard, but in the way that means someone's been coasting for too long. Can I come in? He asked, eyes low. I didn't move, didn't unlock the door. What do you want, Nathan? He shoved his hands into his jacket. I'm not here to fight, just to explain. I crossed my arms. Explain what? That you lied to the family, that you painted me as a thief. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Okay, yeah, I messed up. I waited. I just panicked. You stopped helping. Mom was freaking out. Bills piled up. I didn't know what to say. So I said something stupid. I'm sorry. I studied his face. He looked like someone who'd finally realized the game was over. I forgive you, I said slowly. His eyes brightened. But that doesn't mean I trust you. They dimmed. You don't get to come back just because things got hard. I'm not a vending machine. You don't push a button and get grace. He nodded, ashamed. I'm getting my life back, Nathan. I hope one day you'll get yours too. Then I closed the door. I leaned against it, not crying, not angry, just steady. There's a certain peace that comes when you realize you no longer need to be understood by people who never tried to understand you in the first place. I thought that would be the end of it. That after confronting Nathan, after closing the door on years of dysfunction, the worst was behind me. But silence has layers. And sometimes what feels like closure is just a pause before the next unraveling. 3 weeks after that final conversation, I received a letter. Not from Nathan, not from my mother, from a law firm, one I'd never heard of before. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope, no markings besides my name typed neatly on the front. I opened it slowly, half expecting another accusation, some legal threat from a family desperate to rewrite the story again. But it wasn't that. It was a notification. of estate adjustments. Apparently, my father had rewritten his will 2 years before he retired, without telling me. It stated that Nathan Jennings was now the sole inheritor of their family home, the vacation property in Lake Summers, and the retirement investment accounts they had built over 25 years. My name was not listed, not even under secondary beneficiaries, not even as a contingency. Just gone. I sat at my kitchen table for hours staring at those words. Not because I wanted the money, not because I cared about the house, but because I had been erased quietly, strategically, long before I had ever stepped away. This wasn't punishment, it was preparation. They had been planning for a life without me in it. I called the firm just to verify. The assistant on the line was polite. Yes, Ms. Jennings. The amendments were made official in July of 2019. Do you have a copy of the original version? I didn't, because no one had ever told me I was part of it to begin with. She added, I can't disclose the reason for the changes, but the directive was very specific. Of course it was. That night I went through my documents, receipts, emails, checks I'd written, photos from holidays, voice messages from my mother asking for help, apologizing for Nathan's rough patches, all evidence that I'd been present, that I had shown up again and again, but legally, emotionally, I didn't exist. The next day, I drove to the one person who might know more, my Aunt Loretta. She was my mother's older sister, never married, sharp as glass, and the only one in the family who didn't treat me like a walking wallet. She answered the door, looked at my face, and just said, come in. I didn't even have to explain. I figured you'd come eventually, she said, pouring tea. I raised an eyebrow. You knew. She sat across from me, her eyes soft but tired. I told your dad not to do it. Told your mom it would break you if you ever found out. But they had made up their minds. I clenched my jaw. Why? Why cut me out like that? She looked away. Because you're the only one who ever said no. That silence between us held more truth than any conversation I'd had with my parents in years. They didn't know how to love you when you stopped sacrificing yourself, she continued. You weren't useful anymore. Just confrontational. She paused. Threatening. I stared at my tea. No appetite, no comfort. You know what hurts, I finally said. It's not losing the money. It's realizing they didn't even think I'd find out. Loretta nodded. They assumed you'd keep giving or quietly disappear. On my drive home, I thought of all the times I'd chosen them. Over myself. Over my peace. Over my dignity. And how each time they wrote my loyalty in pencil and theirs in disappearing ink. A week later, I got a call from Evelyn, my mother's oldest friend. She sounded nervous. I probably shouldn't say anything, Carla. But I think you deserve to know. I held my breath. Your mom's planning to transfer the Lake Summers property into Nathan's name before she passes, to avoid any legal challenge later. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just betrayal now. It was premeditated erasure. A life's work, a daughter's love, being documented as irrelevant. I didn't respond to my mother, didn't confront Nathan. What would be the point? They didn't see the problem, only my reaction to it. So instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a solo weekend trip. No guilt, no calls, no obligations. Just me, a small rental cabin, and silence that belonged to me this time. That first morning, I woke up to birdsong. I made coffee, watched the sunrise without checking my phone, and felt something settle inside me. Not forgiveness, not closure, but ownership of my time, my choices, my voice. I spent the weekend journaling, writing things I had never dared say out loud, like how love that demands your silence isn't love, it's control, and how sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away, it's staying gone. You can spend your whole life giving, and they'll still ask for one more thing, even after the letters, the silence, the inheritance. Even after being erased on paper and in memory, they still think there's more of you to take. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd pulled away. 6 months of peace. Not total peace, but a steady kind. A silence that healed instead of hurt. A calendar without obligation. A bank account with no leaks. I was starting to build something new. A life where my name didn't just follow a transaction. Then the call came. I almost didn't answer. The number was unknown, but something in me still listened, still hoping maybe this time would be different. Carla, the voice cracked through. It was my mother. She sounded older, not just aged, but small, shrunken. and not in the guilt-inducing way she used to sound. This time it felt real. I didn't know who else to call, she whispered. I didn't say anything. She continued, It's your father. He's in the hospital. It's bad. They think it might be his heart. The silence between us stretched, and then came the ask. We need help covering the bills. The insurance won't take everything. And Nathan, he's trying, but, that word again. The doorway they always use to invite me back into their chaos. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care, not because I wanted revenge, but because this was the same pattern, over and over. Emergency. Guilt. Withdrawal. What about the retirement accounts, I asked finally. She hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. They'd already burned through them, maybe on Nathan, maybe on themselves, maybe on things I'd never know. I'm sorry, she added quickly. I just thought since you always helped before. That was before I interrupted. And for the first time, I heard her swallow her pride. Or maybe her denial. I understand if you say no, she whispered. I just didn't know who else to turn to. I wish I could say that moment felt triumphant, like I'd finally won something. But it didn't. It felt hollow, because all I ever wanted was not to be needed but to be valued. That night, I sat with the decision. I paced. I replayed old conversations. I even looked up the hospital just to verify the admission. It was true, he was there. And as much as I tried to bury it, the part of me that still loved him felt that old pull. But here's what changed. I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. I said I'll visit, but I'm not fixing anything. She didn't argue, didn't guilt trip, just said okay. The next morning I walked into the hospital room. It was cold, sterile, still. My father looked older than I remembered. Not just because of age, but because this was the first time I was seeing him without the filter of obligation. He looked at me, and for a moment we were just two people who hadn't spoken honestly in years. You came, he said, voice raspy. I nodded. I did. He looked down at the sheets. I didn't think you would. Not after everything. I stood there, waiting. No excuses, he added. I didn't stop her. I let her cut you out of everything. His words hung in the air like smoke. And I regret it. I sat in the chair next to him. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to hear the shift in his tone. I always thought you'd be fine, he continued. You were strong, smart, didn't need help. I closed my eyes. Because that line, that belief was the root of it all. I was the one they leaned on, because I didn't break. So they thought I didn't bleed. He turned his head slowly, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Carla, for the money, for the silence, for forgetting what love should look like. I wanted to forgive him right there, but I didn't, not fully. Because forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a process, and I was still walking through it. Instead, I said thank you for saying that. And it was enough. For now. I stayed for an hour, talked about small things, asked about his treatment plan, avoided old landmines. When I left, he squeezed my hand gently. I hope we talk again. I nodded. Me too. Outside, I sat in my car and stared at the sky, gray, uncertain, but open. I didn't send money. I didn't offer a solution. I didn't lose myself to fix them. But I showed up as me. Not the version they built, but the woman I'd become when I stopped proving my worth. A few days later, Nathan texted again. You really showed up at the hospital. I didn't think you had it in you. I didn't reply. Because his version of strength had always been warped. He still thought love was a currency you spend until you're broke. But I'd learned, the hard way, that love isn't measured by what you give away. It's measured by what you protect, including yourself. You don't always get the apology. You don't always get the phone call where someone finally says, I was wrong. I see what you did for us. I'm sorry I let you carry so much. Sometimes you just get silence. And the choice to stop waiting for something that will never come. After I visited my father in the hospital, things went quiet again. There were no updates, no calls, no signs of reconciliation. It was as if that moment, that fragile thread of truth we shared, existed in its own time zone, and everything else went back to the way it had always been. I didn't expect flowers, or even gratitude, but part of me, if I'm being honest, hoped for something. A message, a card, a moment of recognition. But silence came back like an old habit. Then, just 3 weeks later, my Aunt Loretta left a voicemail. Carla, your father passed this morning. It was quick. He didn't suffer. I thought you should know. I didn't cry, not right away. I didn't scream or rush to pack a bag. I didn't text Nathan or try to speak to my mother. Instead, I just sat, alone in my kitchen, watching the steam rise from a cup of tea that had gone cold. There's a strange stillness that comes when grief finally confirms what you already knew, that you had lost someone long before they were gone. I had grieved the father I never had. I had grieved the version of my family I wished existed. And now I was simply closing a chapter that had already faded. Still, some part of me kept expecting a phone call, an invitation to the funeral, a moment of inclusion even if it was too late. But none came. They buried him quietly, privately, without me. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. Another envelope from the same law firm as before. This time it was an amendment, a line added to the will just days before my father passed. He had left me $12,000, no explanation, no note, just an acknowledgement. I didn't see it as a gift or forgiveness. I saw it as the final page of a book I never got to write in. But even that, even something that small, meant he saw it, eventually. With the money, I did something no one expected. I didn't give it away. I didn't loan it to Nathan. I didn't invest it into a family project. I spent it on myself. A cabin retreat. On the Oregon coast. 3 weeks. No obligations. Just writing, reflection, and quiet. I didn't ask for permission. Didn't explain myself. Because for once, I didn't need to. That retreat changed everything. There was something about waking up to the sound of waves, about hearing your own thoughts without judgment, about being surrounded by strangers who didn't need you to be anything but honest. That made me feel human again. Whole. Not strong. Not dependable, just real. One night we were asked to write a letter. To someone we hadn't forgiven. But instead I wrote to myself, "Dear Carla, you are not broken. You were never too much, or too quiet, or too responsible. You were exactly what they needed, and they used that against you. You were the bridge, the backbone, the bailout, and now you are free. No one else gets to decide what that freedom looks like. Let them remember you however they need to, but you remember who you really are." When I returned home, I found a card in the mail. No return address. No frills. Just Nathan's handwriting. "I don't know how to undo what happened, but I know you deserved better. I hope you find peace. I'm still looking for mine." No signature. No "love your brother." Just silence at the end of ink. And maybe that was enough. The holidays came. And for the first time in over a decade, I didn't spend them dreading the phone call. There was no guilt trip, no obligation dinner, no whispered requests for just a little help this time. I cooked what I loved. I invited friends who made me laugh. I poured wine and toasted to peace. And as I looked around the room, I realized this was family. Not the ones who shared blood, but the ones who shared truth, shared space, shared warmth. I still think about them sometimes. My mother, my brother, even my father. I think about the little girl I was, the one who kept trying to earn her place, the one who kept setting herself on fire just to keep everyone else warm. But I don't miss the burning. I miss the idea of what could have been. The dream of a family where love wasn't measured in sacrifice. And then I remind myself, I am no longer in that story. I chose another one.